This is the International Soccer Preview, and we are Soccer Files Canada. Welcome to Series 17. We're looking at the squads of the 2023 Gold Cup. This is the full-length version for Martinique's players. Here we go. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccer Files Canada. I'm Kevin, and this is Series 17 on the players of the 2023 Gold Cup, and this episode covers Martinique's players. Before we begin looking at the candidates then, we're going to take a look at their recent games because there is some significance here. We're not really looking at it from the team perspective, but from the player perspective, but I'll just go through it quickly. So they had two friendlies in February and March of 2022, which we'll come back to. And then they had their three Nations League games. That was League A, where they were grouped with Panama and Costa Rica. And then they had three friendlies between September and February, September 22 and February 2023. And then their last Nations League game. And, of course, the Gold Cup playoffs, which got them to this cup. So they were a bit blessed there in Puerto Rico, knocking out their main rival, Suriname. So they only had to play two League C teams there. As far as the CONCACAF Nations League goes, they finished third in the group behind Panama and Costa Rica, but did manage to tie Panama at home, which, which may be significant in terms of them challenging second-tier teams like that in this cup. But again, we're not looking at the team. We're looking at the friendlies that they played, and it doesn't even matter what the scores were. But generally, they did well. In February 2022 and March 2022, they played Barbados and Guadeloupe. And then in September 2022, they played Guinea-Bissau, kind of an unlikely pairing there. They tied them 1-1. And in February 2023, they played French Guiana in two games, which are the two most significant. But all five games, and the reason I'm bringing this up, were basically recruitment games, I call them. And they really brought in a lot of players, kind of scraping the citizenship files in France and finding players who were eligible to play for Martinique, and then using a lot of those players in the game. So what we're going to see is a lot of these French players just recruited from France about a year ago, replacing a lot of the players that played in the 2021 Gold Cup. So really a new team for Martinique. In many ways, with a couple of veterans remaining and a couple of veterans, it seems, unceremoniously dumped. But we will go through the team and take a look. So let's begin. And actually, we start with the managers. So let's take a look at the outgoing manager. That is Mario Boccali. So Mario Boccali managed the Martinique team from 2017 to 2021, so took them through two Gold Cups in 2019 and 2021. And he has not signed on with any other team since, even though he's just 44 years old. So no team since managing Martinique and leaving the team in 2021. And the manager who came in is Marc Collat. Marc Collat's a very familiar name. He was manager of Haiti twice, has managed many club teams and been involved administratively. Paris Saint-Germain Youth Academy. He's coached in Algeria and in France and in Qatar under-19 teams, a very experienced manager. And he also brought Haiti to the semi-finals in the 2019 Gold Cup there. So looking good as the manager of Martinique and actually bringing in these changes for them. He's been with the team, by the way, since 2021, so has had a couple of years to work with them. All right, let's look at goalkeepers. We're going to find that Martinique is very rich in defense, goalkeeping and defenders, but quite thin in the midfield. Anyway, let's begin with the definite candidate, and that is Yanis Clementia. So Yanis Clementia is one of many new recruits here. He got his first cap in March 2022. And he now has 6 caps and is 25 years old, sorry. And he plays for Caen in France and played for Nice in France before that. I believe he's French born too, but I don't actually have that written here. So Yanis Clementia, a definite candidate because he started 6 of the remaining 10 games after his first in March 2022. And was on the bench for 1, and then 3 matches, 3 of those friendlies I talked about, not selected for. So Yanis Clementia, a definite candidate. Now we have 3 possible candidates, so no candidates who we saw as likely, but Emmanuel Vermignon is the first one. And Emmanuel Vermignon has been with the team since 2010. And has 21 caps for Martinique, and he's 34 years old, so getting up there in age, but not too bad for a goalie. And he plays in Martinique with Club Colonial, one of their biggest sides there. And he was part of the Gold Cup 2013 and 2017 squads as a backup keeper. But only made the preliminary squad in 2019 and 2021. That doesn't bode that well. But he did return after a 3-year absence in February 2022 and started one of their remaining 11 games prior to the Cup and was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 3, but then not selected for 6 others. So he is a possible candidate, but maybe one of the kind of the old guard that are being replaced. We'll see when we look at the other goalies who is in line here. The next one is Gilles Meslian. And Gilles Meslian has been with the team since 2021, and he has 6 caps and is also 34 years old, and he plays for Golden Lion in Martinique. And he was the starter in the 2021 Gold Cup. That was his only tournament. And since then, he started 3 of their 11 games. And we're measuring since the start of 2022 here. He was started 3 and on the bench for 5 and not selected for 3 others. However, he wasn't selected for the last 2 matches. So that doesn't bode that well, especially given the competition here. Next one is Theo de Person, and he's kind of the new guard. So 2 players of the old guard and 2 of the new. It'll be interesting to see who's selected. Theo de Person is very young. He is 22 years old. No caps for Martinique. He first appeared on the bench in March 2023, but he was on the bench for all 3 of their games prior to the tournament. So those games that Meslian missed, he was brought in for. And he got a much better club affiliation. He's with Auxerre in France since 2021 and with their B team since 2018. So in terms of club affiliation, it's a big step up. So again, it'll be interesting to see who makes it. We have 2 goalies who seem to be off the squad. And the first is Loic Chauvet. So long-term with Martinique since 2011. And he has just 21 caps. They don't play an awful lot of games in truth. He also is 34 years old, and he also plays in Martinique. And he was part of all the Gold Cups since 2013. So 2013 and 2017, he was the backup, as well as 2021. Only in 2019 was he the starter. And some excellent saves there against Mexico, especially. However, he last appeared for the national team in March 2022, and he is not even listed after that, suggesting that maybe he announced his retirement or Anyway, it's a stronger suggestion that he's off the team if he's not even listed. So Loic Chauvet seems to be on the way out after serving Martinique well for 10 years. And finally, we have a young keeper, Yannick Etiel, who also seems to be off the squad. So he was with the team in 2022 and just got one cap. First appeared on the bench in June of 2022, started one cap, and then not selected after that. So a very unlikely candidate. I should actually put him as possible but unlikely, because he did play since the beginning of 2022. Okay, and that is the goalkeepers. So yes, when we come back in the part 2 of the media cast, it'll be interesting to see which way the manager is going. I kind of suspect he'll favor the new players over the old guard, because the quality is higher if you look at the clubs Caen and Auxerre in France compared to Golden Lion and Franciscain in Martinique. No insult to Martinique, but those French clubs are definitely higher quality, I would say. Okay, let's move on to central defenders, and we begin with 3 likely candidates as central defenders. Jean-Claude Michelet has been with Martinique since 2021. He's 23 years old, and he has 6 caps and 2 goals, actually. Good for a central defender. And he is with Golden Lion in Martinique. He started 3 of their 11 games since the beginning of 2022, as well as subbing in for 2 and being on the bench for 4. So just 2 matches that he was not called up for. And I forgot to do his history there. He was selected for the 2021 Gold Cup, but he was replaced by Florian Goma, presumably due to injury, although it didn't say that. So Jean-Claude Michelet, a likely candidate here. Doesn't seem likely as a starter, though, but we're not really considering that here, just whether they will be named to the squad. The second candidate we consider likely to be named to the squad is Florence Pulolo. Florent Pulolo. Florent Pulolo is, yes, one of those players kind of picked up recently, so since 2022, but he does have 6 caps, and he is 26 years old. And he played for Sigma Olomouc in the Czech Republic, but is actually moving to another team, Lada Boleslav in Czech Republic, in July here of 2023. And prior to playing in Czech Republic, played for Getafe in Spain. So those are good quality clubs. And he got his first cap, as I said, in June 2022. He started 6 of their remaining 9 games prior to the Cup, and just those 3 friendlies that he wasn't selected for. So Florence Pulolo, a likely candidate in our opinion. And the third likely candidate is Jonathan Rivieres. He has been with the team since 2022, so another of the new recruits, and he's 34 years old. He has 6 caps and 1 goal, and he plays for a smaller club in France called Bourg-en-Bresse. Bourg-en-Bresse in France, and but he's coming from Caen in France, where the goalkeeper we talked about played. So a good quality team there, Caen. And he got his first cap in March 2021, so a little earlier than others. Hang on, that can't be right. That's March 2022. And yes, that's right, because he started 6 of their remaining 9 games prior to the Cup. And he also was not selected for the 3 others. So I must say I'm tempted to put Pulolo and Rivieres as definite candidates. I think I will, because the only 3 games that they didn't play were those 3 friendlies, against 2 of them against French Guiana and the other against Guinea-Bissau. So I'm going to be bold and put them as definite candidates. Okay, the next one is Florian Goma. We heard his name because he replaced Michelet in the 2021 Gold Cup. He got his first cap that same year in 2021 and has earned 4 caps for the team. He's just 22 years old and plays in Martinique for St. Joseph. And as mentioned, he was part of the Gold Cup in 2021, not initially selected to the squad, but brought in to replace Jean-Claude Michelet there. And he started 2 of their games since the start of 2022, subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1. So not selected for 7 matches, including the last 3. So that doesn't look great for Florian Goma, especially given the candidates ahead of him. So we have him as possible. I would almost go with unlikely there. But, you know, maybe not, because they sometimes bring 5 or 6 central defenders. Okay, the last possible candidate there. That didn't sound right, the last possible candidate. The candidate we have as a possible is Davy Singama, and he's been with Martinique since 2022 and has 3 caps and no goals. He's 22 years old and plays in Martinique for Golden Lion, and he got his first cap in those friendlies in February 2022 and started the first 3 of their remaining 6 games prior to the Cup, and was on the bench for the last 3 matches. So actually there were several players who played in those February 2022 games. So we see them getting caps in those games, and a lot of them just disappeared completely after that. A couple of them were on the bench after that. So among that group, Davy Singama is one of the more successful recruits from the February 2022 scrape. So Davy Singama, a possible candidate. And then we have a possible but unlikely candidate in Ambrose Felicitat. So Ambrose Felicitat has been with the team since 2019 and is 30 years old. And he has 3 caps and 0 goals. He also plays in Martinique. For the 2021 Gold Cup, he was on the roster but saw no action. So you see he's kind of on the fringes of the team already, certainly not a starter. And since the start of 2022, he started 1 of their 11 games and was subbed in for 1 and not selected for 9 matches, including the last 6. So that puts him at the possible but unlikely level for us. Okay, moving on to left backs. We have 2 likely candidates and 1 possible. So the first likely candidate is Andy Marnie. And he has been with the team since 2018. And he has 9 caps and 1 goal. So not one of the new recruits here. He plays for Club Colonial in Martinique, and he's 27 years old. However, he was not part of either the 2019 or the 2021 Gold Cup. He made the preliminary roster in 2019, and as you'll see, he wasn't around for the 2021 Gold Cup because he was off the team, so not a consideration there. But he returned after an almost 3-year absence in September 2022, and then started 5 of their remaining 6 games prior to the Cup and was on the bench for 1 other. So I think he made a comeback in that game against Guinea-Bissau and is one of the ones who kind of successfully made it onto the team, or back to the team in his case. The other likely candidate is Florian Lapis. So Florian Lapis has been with the team since 2022, and he has 4 caps and is 29 years old, and is another of the recruits from France there. So he was born in France and plays for Versailles, having played for Orléans and for Niort, Chamois Niortais prior to that. Actually, he was not really part of the recruiting scape because he was a consideration for the Gold Cup in 2019, not 2021, but 2019, he was selected to the preliminary squad, so an earlier consideration. But he is part of the recruiting scrape in the sense that he got his first cap in June 2022, so maybe he was considered in 2019 and then reconsidered around this time. And from June 2022, he started 3 of their remaining 9 games prior to the Cup and was subbed in for 1 and on the bench for 1 and not selected for 4 others. So maybe that's a little generous considering him a likely candidate with that record, kind of not selected for half the games. But given his club affiliations, we consider him or we put him as a likely candidate. And we're not changing it. Okay, the possible candidate is a veteran with the team, Yorman Thimon. A veteran in terms of he's one of the old guard who's been there for a while. He's actually only 26 years old and has been with the team since 2017 and has 9 caps. But he was part of the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups. In 2021, he was just on the bench though. And since that time, he started 3 of their last 11 games and was on the bench for the last 2 of them and not selected for 6 others. But 5 of those were the first 5 matches of 2022. So the inverse of a couple of players we've looked at, he was actually off the team at the beginning of the period and then on the team at the end. And it's the end that's the most important. He was on the bench for the last 2. So we consider Yordan Thiemann a possible candidate, maybe even a touch higher, but I wouldn't go as high as likely. Okay, on to right backs. Again, we said they're rich in defence, and they are. They have 2 likely candidates here and then 2 possible candidates. So we begin with Patrick Berner. Patrick Berner has been around for a little while, at least since 2021, and he is 27 years old and has 7 caps and 1 goal. So he was recruited from France for the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was a starter, and he plays for Nîmes in France since 2020 and played for Nice in France for several years. Before that, in fact, he kind of grew up through Nice, through their youth club and all. So again, a starter in 2021, and he started 4 games, including the last 3 since the start of 2022, and he was not selected for 7 others. But again, because he started the last 3, we consider him likely. I was really kind of wringing my hands over this, but Patrick Berner seems one of the players who kind of shows up for the cups and doesn't play a lot of their games in between. As you can see, he's just got 7 caps, so a bit of a bold prediction, but we thought of him as likely. Okay, the other likely candidate is Ronnie Labon. So Ronnie Labon has been with Martinique just since 2023 here, and he's 25 years old and 2 caps then, and another of those recruits from France. He also plays for Nîmes in France, so he's a teammate of Patrick Berner, and he played for Lorient B in France also, and all of his clubs have been in France. And he got his first cap in June 2023, so just before the tournament here, and he started both of their 2 games prior to the Cups. Those would be the Gold Cup playoff games. So again, maybe a bit generous saying he's likely, but when they come in at the end like that and they're starters, it kind of boosts their chances. We would say, well, if they are selected, it might be at the cost of Karol Vitulin, might be at the cost of the veteran players on the team, because these 2 possible candidates are veterans. Karol Vitulin has been with the team since 2010, and he's 32 years old. And he has 60 caps and 2 goals, so truly a veteran for Martinique, where he plays his club soccer for l'Aiglon. And he was also born in France, but seems to have lived in Martinique. He's been with clubs in Martinique since 2008. And was not part of the Gold Cup in 2013, made the preliminary roster there, but he's been a starter in the 3 Gold Cups since 2017. Not necessarily finishing all the games. In fact, he usually in 2019 and 2021 started game 1 and then lost his starting position. Anyway, he started 1 of their 11 games since the start of 2022. He was subbed in for 4. He was actually suspended for 2. I believe that was on yellow card accumulation, but that was the first 2 games. And then not selected for 3 matches, but significantly those include the last 2 matches. So that really brings him down a peg. So it looks like, in a sense, Ronnie Lebon has taken over Carl Vigelin's position. But still, Carl Vigilin is a possible candidate, and we'll see how that goes. I forgot to put Ronnie Lebon's name in the visual for those YouTube watchers. Okay, and the other possible candidate is Romario Barthelleri. Romario Barthelleri has been with them since 2018 with Martinique and has 12 caps and no goals. He's 29 years old and he plays for Golden Lion in Martinique. So he was there for the last 2 Gold Cups, started on the bench in 2019 and then gained a starting position. And in 2021, he started game 1, but was subbed out at halftime and then lost his starting position and didn't appear even as a substitute after that. But since then, he started 1 of their 11 games since the start of 2022 and subbed in for 2 and not selected for 8 others. So really drifting off the squad there, perhaps at the expense of these French players coming in. French club players, I should say. Okay, that is right backs and almost brings us, no, that does bring us to the end of defenders, where I said they were rich. And now we move on to midfielders, where I said they have a bit of a poverty of players overall. And we start with the position of versatile midfielder. So this is kind of my own thing when I see them playing all over the field and can't really pin down their position. And there we have Stéphane Abol, who seems to be off the squad now. So he's been a real soldier for Martinique since 2010 with 61 caps and 9 goals. And in short, he's been part of every Gold Cup that we've talked about since 2013 as a starter in the last 3. He's 30 years old. 32 years old. Yeah, just reaching that age of retirement and having played every game for October since 2016, believe it or not. That is 28 games in a row that he started, and he finished all but 3 of them, so went the whole 90 minutes, or in 1 or 2 cases 120 minutes. 28 games in a row. He last appeared for the national team in February 2022. That was their first game after the Gold Cup, and then abruptly disappeared off the list after February 2022. So whether he announced his retirement, I talked about disappearing off the list. It sometimes means retirement. It sometimes means nothing. I can't figure it out, but disappearing from the list seems a bit more kind of permanent than just not being called up. So Stéphane Abol, I would like to see him come back, but it looks like he's off the team. Okay, so we move on to defensive midfielders. We have 2 likely and 1 possible candidate and 1 possible but unlikely. The first one is Ciro Manduki. Ciro Manduki has been with the team since 2019. And he has 8 caps and 2 goals. So he is 31 years old. And he was also born in France and plays for clubs in France, currently with Paris FC. and he has yet to reach a Gold Cup. He made the preliminary squad in 2019, and not even that in 2021. He was kind of off the team, but he returned after a more than 2.5-year absence to start 5 of their remaining 9 games prior to the Cup, as well as being subbed in for 1. So again, just those 3 friendlies with French Guiana and Guinea-Bissau that he wasn't selected for. So he looks like a likely candidate. And again, because it was just the friendly games he missed, I'm going to move him up to definite there. Also, Jonathan Mexique, we had as a likely candidate. Let's see if we should move him up. He's been with the team since 2022, and he has 6 caps and is 28 years old, no goals. And he plays for Châteauroux in France and was with Cholet in France before that, so born in France. One of the new recruits, indeed. He got his first cap in 2022, June of 2022, started 2 of their remaining 9 games, and then was subbed in for 4 and not selected for the 3 friendlies that we talked about. But I think I'm going to keep Jonathan Mexique at the likely level because he started fewer games than Manduki. At the possible level, we have Thomas Efestian. So Thomas Efestian has been with Martinique since 2019, and he's 28 years old and has 4 caps and no goals. And he plays for a team in Hungary whose name I dare not pronounce. Okay, I have to. It's Mezőkövesd in Hungary. I'll call them Mezzo to save my lips some pain. And that's a new move to Hungary since 2023. And he was with Molenbeek in Belgium. Several Martinique players have an association with Molenbeek, maybe some kind of an agreement there. And also Westerlo in Belgium. He also was born in France, so has played all of his soccer over there in Europe. And he got his first cap in March 2019, so not a new recruit. But like a player we saw before, he made it to the preliminary squad for the 2019 Gold Cup and then disappeared for the 2021 Gold Cup, but came back after a 3-year absence in March 2022 and started 1 of their remaining 10 games and subbed in for the last 2 games. So kind of in and out of the squad is Thomas Efestian, but we think because of those last 2 games, he's a possible candidate because he was called up. Those were the Gold Cup playoff games. And finally, we have possible but unlikely Carlo Rabathali. So Carlo Rabathali has been with the team since 2022 and is 23 years old with 2 caps and 1 goal. And he plays in Martinique. He got his first cap in February 2022, so actually found during that recruiting drive. He didn't start any of their remaining 11 games, but was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 2. And not selected for 7 others. So we have him as possible but unlikely Carlo Rabathali. Okay, so defensive midfielders. This is exactly the same pattern as Guatemala. Strong in defense, strong even in defensive midfielders. But then it gets really thick really thin when we get to central midfield, all the way up until forwards, and then they're okay with forwards, just like Guatemala. Okay, so in the central midfield, a position usually populated by 4 or 5 candidates, we only have 1 candidate who is a possible but unlikely. So it's Christophe Hugon, or Christophe Jugon, and he has been with Martinique since 2014. And he is 28 years old and plays for Club Franciscan in Martinique. And he's been part of the Gold Cup squads more of a bench player since 2017, so has been involved in 3 cups. Recently started 2 of their 11 games since the start of 2022 and subbed in for 1, but wasn't selected for 8 others, including the last 5 matches. But I got to say, because there are so few candidates in this in the central midfield, that probably increases his chances. But I'm going to keep him as possible, but unlikely for now. Left midfielders, we have no players coded as left midfielders, and right midfielders, just 1 candidate, although it is a definite candidate, the veteran Daniel Harrell. I believe he's captain of the team too. So Daniel Harrell, 94 caps and 3 goals since his first one way back in 2006. But he's only 31 years old. No, that can't be right. No, my mistake. He's 34 years old, and he's played in Martinique his whole career and has been involved in the Gold Cup, a starter in all 4 Gold Cups since 2013. And he started 10 of their 11 games since the start of 2022 and just subbed in for 1 match. That was the last match. So still going strong at 34 is Daniel Harrell, and we consider him a definite candidate. In fact, he's the only candidate there. And then for left wingers and right wingers both, we have no candidates. So as I said, very thin in the midfield. We do have a couple of general midfielders though, and so they may fill in some of the gaps. Otherwise it'll be forwards coming back a bit or defenders moving up a bit. And we have Ghislaine Arbeau coded as a general midfielder, and he has been with the team since 2022, and he plays in Martinique. He has 5 caps and no goals, and he is 23 years old. So he got his first cap in February 2022, part of that recruiting drive, and started 3 of their remaining 5 games prior to the cup, and he was subbed in for the other 2. I wonder if that's February 2023 actually, because just 5 games there, so making him brand new to the squad there. Ghislaine Arbeau, a likely candidate. And we also have a possible candidate in Evan Salinas. So Evan Salinas has been with Martinique since 2022 and is 25 years old with just 2 caps. And he also plays in Martinique, but he has played elsewhere actually. He just moved back to Martinique. Well, I don't know if he moved back or moved there because he was born in France. And the club he was with, Châtellerault in France, was in France before that, but he's a bit of a globetrotter, having played in Greece and with the team in Kosovo. So a bit of an interesting career there. And he got his first cap in February 2022 and started the first the first 2 of their remaining 5 games. That was on the bench for the last 3 matches. So again, I think that should be February 2023. I'm just going to actually stop the video quickly and check that. Okay, I did check that, and in both cases my notes were wrong. It was February 2023 where both of them got their start, and then 5 caps for Arbeau and 2 caps for Salinas. Okay, so that is why we have Arbeau as a likely candidate and Salinas as a possible candidate there. And we move on to the forward line. We begin actually with attacking midfielders, where we only have 1 candidate. So again, the midfield proving a bit thin here, and that is the possible candidate Kevin Fortune. You may be surprised that we have him as just a possible, but I think he is under threat from some of the new players coming in. So Kevin Fortune himself is from France, is a kind of an import from France. He's 33 years old, but has been with the team just since 2018 with 12 caps and 3 goals. So he plays for Orléans in France, and Châteauroux, who we saw another player with before that, and Auxerre, who we saw another player with. But interestingly, he played for Tractor in Iran. They used to be called Tractor Sazi, and I like that name, and I'm sad they changed it, Tractor Sazi. So playing in Iran, a bit adventurous there. And he was, as I said, born in France and a starter in the 2019 and 2021 Gold Cups. However, that was the last time he had played for Martinique, was in the 2021 Gold Cup, but then he returned after a 2-year absence just before this cup in June 2023 to start one of their remaining 2 games and subbed in for the other. So it could be that, kind of like Patrick Berner, he kind of comes just for the big games, and or it could be that he was just not selected for the team. But anyway, that's why we have him as a possible candidate, despite having started the last 2 Gold Cups, Kevin Fortune. And he's the only candidate as attacking midfielder, so actually that may raise his desirability a little bit. But meanwhile, we have 3 players. We're going to put them under secondary strikers here, but really they're just labeled as strikers. So kind of like general defender and general midfielders, they're just general attackers who haven't been kind of specified into a position yet. The first one is Stevin Baker at the possible level. So Stevin Baker, been with the team just since 2023 here, and just 2 caps, and is 22 years old, and he does play in Martinique, and he got his first cap in February 2022. So it looks like those February games against French Guiana were more of a local recruiting drive among the Martinique players. Baker didn't start any of the remaining 5 games prior to the cup, but he was subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 1. So that made us feel he was a possible candidate. Also, we have Mail Criffar as a possible candidate. And he, very similar, has been with the team since 2023 with 2 caps. And he is younger. He is 21 years old. And he also plays in Martinique. He got his first cap in February 2023. I think I said 2022 for Baker, but I'm obviously having a problem with that date. It's 2023 that these players were recruited in, and he started one of their remaining 5 games, subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 1. So actually a bit more successful than some of the players there who just showed up in those games and then disappeared completely. So Maël Criffar and Stevin Baker, both possible candidates. And then we have one player who is possible but unlikely, and I think he was actually one of the ones who did just kind of show up for those games. Martinique since 2023, 2 caps and 1 goal for Gabriel Billon, and he plays for Gold Star in Martinique. And he got his first cap in February 2023, started 1 game, subbed in for 1 and was on the bench for 1, but then not selected for the last 2 matches. Actually, that's exactly the same as Criffar. So maybe I'll move him up to possible as well. Yes, but again, those are 3 of the more successful candidates coming out of that recruitment drive in February 2023, not 2022, although they did do a bit of recruiting then too. Okay, on to forwards, and we have Brighton Labo as a definite candidate here. And he is one of the recruits, not from February 2022, but from March 2022. I'll get to that in a moment. So that was his first cap, and he has had 7 caps and 2 goals since March 2022. And he is 27 years old. So he plays actually mostly in Switzerland now, Lausanne Sport in Switzerland, and also played in Belgium and for Rapid Bucharest in Romania in 2019 and 20. So born in France, part of the recruiting drive. Since March 2022, he started 7 of their remaining 10 games and was not selected for 3 others. Those were the 3 friendlies that we talked about against Guinea-Bissau and French Guiana, the only games he missed. So Brighton Labo, a definite candidate. We also have Mikel Biron, part of the older guard here. So he's been with Martinique since 2018 and is 25 years old. He has a good scoring record, 13 caps and 7 goals. So that's good. And he also plays for teams in Europe. So we mentioned Molenbeek. He's one of the ones associated with Molenbeek in Belgium. And he also played for Nancy in France. But he actually seems to have moved over from Martinique because he did play in Martinique as well. He was a sub in the 2019 Gold Cup, but not selected for the preliminary squad in 2021. Like a few players we've seen, he was off the team during that time, but he returned after a more than 2.5-year absence in March 2022 and started 3 of their remaining 11 games, as well as being subbed in for 2. But he wasn't selected for 6 matches, including the last 2. So we moved him down to possible on that basis. Missing the last 2 matches is a bit worrying in terms of whether they're going to be selected. We have 2 more possible candidates. So Enric Rupern. Enric Rupern has been with Martinique since 2021 and is 24 years old with 7 caps and no goals, even though he's a forward. And he plays in Martinique and has his whole career. And he was selected for the 2021 Gold Cup, where he was a substitute. And he started 1 of their last 11 games, subbed in for 2 and on the bench for 3, and not selected for 5 others. So we consider Enric Rupern a possible candidate. And the third possible candidate there is Carl Fabian. And Carl Fabian joined the team in 2022 and has 5 caps and no goals also as a forward. Anyway, no goals. I thought he had scored actually in the Gold Cup playoff games, but perhaps I'm wrong. He plays for Vierzon in France. I don't know that team. Before that, he was with Orléans. Orléans in France, sometimes with their B team. So born in France. So another recruit from the March 2022 games where he got his first cap, and he started 4 of the remaining 10 games prior to the cup, as well as subbing in for 1 and on the bench for 1, and not selected for 4 others. So we consider Carl Fabian also a possible candidate. And we finish with, we have 2 more. One is possible but unlikely, and that is Johnny Marojo. He has been with Martinique since 2015, so a bit of a veteran as far as things go. And he is 29 years old and has 24 caps and 1 goal. And he plays in Martinique since 2015, but he did play in France for Arles Avignon. And for Etoile, Etoile is in Martinique. So he kind of went over to France from 2014 to 16 and did a stint there. As far as Martinique goes, he's been part of the Gold Cup since 2017, selected for every tournament, but on the bench until in 2021, he gained a starting position for games 2 and 3. There, but that might be as far as he gets in terms of the Gold Cup, because he only started 2 of those friendlies that we talked about, and he wasn't selected for the other 9 matches since the start of 2022, and that includes the last 4 matches. So it seems like he's just being selected kind of for the experimental or for the recruitment squads. Johnny Maraho, and seems to be out of the picture, but we have him as possible, but unlikely. And we finish with a big name here, Kevin Parsimon. So he seems to be off the squad. Um, he has 56 caps and 35 goals. What a loss for Martinique to lose his services. So Kevin Parsimon is 36 years old. He plays for Golden Lions in Martinique. He returned there in 2019, having played for a club in Thailand, and he's also played in the Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, and several teams in France. So an interesting career. He was a starter in the 2013 Gold Cup, and then in the 2017 and 2019 ones. However, he was off the team for a while, a 3-year absence prior to coming back in June 2022. And then he started just one of their 9 games remaining and subbed in for one and was on the bench for one, but then he wasn't selected for the last 6 matches and not even listed there. So yes, I thought he was part of the 2021 team, but actually has been off the team for a while, and now truly seems to be off it, despite returning for a couple of games there. So we'll see. Not impossible that he makes the squad, but seems to be off it. All right, and that brings us to the end of part 1. And when we come back for part 2, we'll see which of these players made it. We're back for part 2, and truth be told, it's only a couple of days after part 1. In the case of the 3 teams that made it through the playoffs, we were scrambling a bit to prepare the media cast because we only had a couple of days to do so. So we hadn't, when we did part 1, looked at the preliminary and final rosters, even though we knew they were out, because we were saving that for this part. And unfortunately, we may have to produce a couple of teams' player podcasts after they finish their first game. So that's true in the case of Martinique. But nevertheless, I think it's a valuable podcast, or valuable media cast with information. And Martinique had produced a 35-man preliminary squad. They were allowed to choose up to 60. But just chose 35 and then reduced that to a 23-man final squad. So here we go. So for those joining us from part 1, we continue on to look at the list and see which one of the candidates that we went over made it. And for people joining us for the short version, I'll just kind of give you the context for part 1, where we made a list of players based mostly on their participation from the beginning of 2022, and we categorized them according to their likelihood of making the team. So in doing so, we gave some biographical information on the players, particularly their recent participation, and that's what we used to judge whether they looked like they were playing enough to be selected for the team or whether they had drifted off the team. So we will be reviewing that when we go through the list, but of course not giving all of that information again. Okay, let us move on then. And we began by looking at the managers. So we noted that Mario Boccali was on his way out, and Mark Collat on his way in. And unlike Mexico, the manager was not fired a couple of days before the Cup. So Mark Collat will view him as having been selected for the team, selected himself, or selected by the FA of Martinique, I suppose. Moving on to goalkeepers, we had a definite candidate in Yanis Clementia, and he did make the squad. And then we had an interesting kind of battle between newcomers and the old guard. So we noted in the first podcast that Martinez had basically done a couple of recruitment drives and brought in some new players, and that might threaten some of the ones who have been there and played previous Gold Cups. And that seems to be the case here. Emmanuel Boumignon, kind of part of the old guard there, was selected for the squad. However, Gilles Meslien, the starting keeper in the 2021 Gold Cup, not selected even for the preliminary squad, which is a bit surprising. We had him as a possible candidate, as well as Boumignon. And we also had one of the newcomers as a possible candidate, the young Theo de Persen. And Theo de Persen is selected for the squad. So those are our three goalies. Our possible but unlikely candidate, Yannick Etiel, and our seemingly off the squad, Loic Chauvet. Neither of those selected. Yannick Etiel actually did make the preliminary squad, but Loic Chauvet did not. Okay, so that's the situation for goalkeepers. And moving on to defense, we had three likely candidates for central defender. However, during part one, we moved two of them up to definite candidates. And it doesn't matter because all three of them made it anyway. Florent Poulolo, we moved him up to definite. He was selected. And Jonathan Rivieres also selected for the final squad. And Jean-Claude Michalet, we left him as a likely candidate, and he made the squad as well. We had two possible candidates. One of them, Davy Singama, did make the final squad, and the other, Florian Goma, did not even make the preliminary squad. So not really a surprise, though. They were both at the possible level. And we had possible but unlikely Ambroise Philistet, and he was not selected even for the preliminary squad. Okay, so moving on to left backs, we noted they were pretty rich in defense, so a lot of candidates here. When we get to the midfield, it's a different story. But we had two likely candidates for left back, and one of them is Andy Marnie, and the other was Florian Lapis, and both of them were selected. And also the possible candidate, Jordan Thimond, was also selected for the squad. So he, possibly some of those players may be shifted from left back to the midfield. At right back, we also had two likely candidates. And the first one was Patrick Berner, and the second was Ronnie Labon. And both of them made it to the final squad. We had a possible candidate in veteran Carl Vitulin. And again, it seems to be the kind of younger generation winning out here, or the new recruits, because Carl Vitulin not selected for the preliminary squad even, and nor was Romario Barthelary. Also not selected for the preliminary squad. We had both of them as possible candidates. So maybe a bit surprising they didn't even make the preliminary squad there. And moving on to midfielders now. We had a versatile midfielder, Stéphane Abol, a real regular in the cup since 2013, but not selected even for the preliminary squad here. We did have him as seemingly off the squad because he hadn't appeared since February 2022. So sad to see Stéphane Abol go. For defensive midfielders, there's still a lot of candidates. It's just after this that it gets really thin. And so they really need these guys, I suppose. Cyril Manduki was selected for the squad, and Jonathan Mexique. We had both of them as likely candidates, but we actually moved Manduki up to a definite candidate. It doesn't matter. Both of them made it. And even the possible candidate, Thomas Efestian, selected for the final squad. However, Carlo Rabathali He was a possible but unlikely candidate. He did not make the squad, but was selected to the preliminary squad. All right, so defensive midfielders. Now we get to the thin area of the field. For central midfielders, we only had Christophe Dugon, and he was only at the possible but unlikely level, and he was not selected at all. So no players coded as central midfielders. Obviously, other players, probably defensive midfielders, will have to fill in there. Right midfielders, though, we had the veteran and captain Daniel Harel, and he did make the squad. There were no players coded as left midfielder either, so just Daniel Harel there, and no players coded for left wing or right wing. Shocking, isn't it? However, we did have a couple of general midfielders, so their position in the midfield not really specified yet. And both of them made it, actually. The likely candidate, Ghislaine Arbeau, making it to the final squad, and the possible candidate, Evan Salines, also making it, of course, probably aided by the fact that there are so few midfielders that they was selected. Moving on to forwards, actually attacking midfielders. So we only had one, and it was at the possible level. It was Kevin Fortune, and he was selected for the squad. And these aren't really secondary strikers, just general strikers. We had three candidates at the possible level. We actually moved one up to the possible level. So the first one, Stevine Baker, did make the final squad. However, the other two, Maël Criffard and Gabriel Bilon, just making the preliminary squad, those two. And finally, we move on to forward. So we had Brighton Lebeau as a definite candidate, and indeed he did make the squad. And then we had three possible candidates. Somewhat surprisingly, Michael Biron was not selected for the squad. So we predicted that they may favor the kind of the newer recruits. So it looks like Michael Biron is kind of a victim of that. The two other possible candidates, Enric Ruperne and Carl Fabian, one of the new candidates there, both selected for the squad. Okay. And then possible but unlikely Johnny Marojo, not selected even for the preliminary squad, and nor was Kevin Parsemin. So we had him coded as seemingly off the team, and then this is kind of evidence that he was. Okay, and then we'll just finish with a couple of summaries. So first we'll talk about notable non-selection. So these are generally players we had as likely or possible who didn't make the team. We don't actually have any of those, but we have a few names that surprises us a little bit here. So the starting keeper in the 2021 Gold Cup, Gilles Meslien, and we had him only as a possible candidate given his recent participation, but still a surprise that he did not even make the preliminary squad, or at least make the Gold Cup as a backup keeper. Also a bit surprising, and these are all kind of veterans that in effect have been replaced by new recruits from France. Right back Carl Vichelin, 60 caps for the national team since 2010, but didn't make it even to the preliminary squad. Stefan Abol, also since 2010 and with 61 caps. We had him as seemingly off the squad though, and indeed that seems to be the case, not selected even for the preliminary squad. And to a lesser degree, Kevin Parsemin, he wasn't around for the 2022 2021 Gold Cup. Made a bit of a comeback after that, but not convincingly so, and then not selected for the preliminary squad here. And moving on to surprise inclusions. I don't know if you noticed there, but I did an edit. I usually try to hide the edits, but in this case, I recorded the whole last section with my microphone off, and now it's about 2 hours later. I'm putting together the video. I realized, oh my God, the microphone was off during that part, so I had to kind of put everything back the way it was and re-record. So surprise inclusions, though, we really have none for Martinique. Part of that was because we did we put it together a bit later because of the playoff teams. We had to put them together a bit later, so we did have access to the June games there, so we were able to include them in part one, and actually a few players did come in at that point. Anyway, we knew about them, so that means there are no surprise inclusions. In other words, the players were all at the potable level or higher, all of the players that were selected. For new players, again, any new players that came in June, we saw in those June games, so we didn't have any new players making the final squad. We did have 7 players making the preliminary squad that we hadn't introduced in part one. One of them had been on our radar because he was on the preliminary squad for the 2021 Gold Cup. That was Thuiler Ursulet. But the other 5 players, it was 5, not 6. The other 5 players were brand new to us, have never been even on the bench, it seems, for Martinique. But we won't introduce them because they just made the preliminary squad, and perhaps if they come into the picture more in the future, we will do that. And also for injury updates, there's nothing to report. That's blessed news for Guatemala fans, but kind of humorous because I was so close to the end. It was just like about a minute and a half that I did without the microphone. But anyway, it does give me the chance to say this, which I hadn't said. We saw in the notable non-selections there a general pattern of new players being found in France with French teams, a kind of a scrape of citizenships there to find players with that connection to Martinique, and they brought some good players in there, some higher quality players, if truth be told. But that is at the expense of some veterans for Martinique. So it's going to be interesting, actually, after doing this player podcast or media cast. I give Martinique a better chance than we gave them in the team podcast before we had really analyzed the players. So Martinique could be the surprise of the cup. Some really good quality players there. And that does bring us to the end of the media cast. And I hope you enjoy watching the Gold Cup. Bye-bye.